Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. I'm really excited to have my friend Lilly MacKenzie back on the podcast. She was on not too long ago, episode 765. She's a BYU student. She's a computer engineering major. She kind of told me before we went live, she got some really good grades. So congratulations, Lilly. That's a huge accomplishment. She's transgender.
Oh, yeah.
So she's a transgender Latter-day Saint, woman at BYU. Her pronouns are she, her. And she came on in July, roughly July of 2024. And that was right before the updated handbook policy statements that impacted transgender Latter-day Saints. So Lilly's been navigating that. And I'm just glad she's back on the podcast. We love hearing from transgender Latter-day Saints. And their courage to share their stories to help us better support good people like Lilly. So I'm really glad you're back on the podcast, Lilly.
Thank you, Richard.
And we will turn it over to you to update your listeners on your story.
Okay. Well, last time it was just my general story, more on the secular side. And this time I kind of wanted to roll back and talk about my spiritual journey from back then all the way to now. And we're actually going to rewind to a bit before I actually finally figured things out. So this is like my freshman year of high school. I had a bunch of personal growth during that time, during that little period, where I learned a really, really intense importance of the atonement and the plan of salvation. And that was important when I later figured things out because, what led to that later was I was drawn to try and be an ally to a community that I was joining that had a lot of queer people. And I literally told myself, you're going to find a way to be Christ-like and an ally if you're going to join the space. And I clung to that the whole way through. And then come early 2021, that was when everything started coming in for me. February was a intense month that was very tumultuous for me. I had about a week of like intense pouring into all I could, all that I could find as a spiritual source at the time. All Out in the Open, formerly Questions from the Closet, was something I found, and that was like one of those first things. And hearing just all that stuff that they had out at that time was such a big help for me because it helped me think about the things I needed to be spiritually thinking about. Because the church website at the time was like starting to shrink because like different stories were being taken down, but there were like a handful at the time because this was like that old Mormon gay website. It was by then the name was changed, but there were like only a handful of things on there. And I don't know, it wasn't quite explaining to me what I was searching for. But after starting to think about some of the patriarchal blessing stuff from one of the really early episodes, I went back for the first time in probably a year and a half and read my patriarchal blessing with the things that patriarch talked about in mind, or even just deciding to read it in a way that to myself that would apply to me more, despite language in there that was under the assumption of who I was my freshman year when I was going through all that spiritual growth, because that's when I got my patriarchal blessing. I ended up having multiple, I wouldn't say epiphanies. It's more like multiple things came to me as like a spiritual confirmation of what I read in there at the time. Like the first one was there's stuff that talks about like having many gifts and talents. And when I read through that part while thinking about who I was as a child of God and whether I was queer or not, specifically with what I had been thinking about, which was sexuality. And that just, it hit really hard that was like an important part of who I was. And that is like the first thing that has carried me through all these years is that piece of revelation that I got from reading that, my blessing at that time. But there's more that I've gotten over the years as I've gone back and checked it more and more. So I'll get to that down my timeline because I'm trying to stick to one this time. So I was able to come to terms with it. And then there's the general, we jumped through all the different months of that year and how I was in denial, but still learning and exploring and listening to what I could, including a lot of stuff from your podcast on gender stuff. And then we come to November, and I came to terms with one night with the fact that I was trans. I wasn't anything else I was trying to be or say that I was, because I was scared of saying that label, because I was scared of the spiritual implications of losing access to the temple, since that policy at the time was everything but hormone treatment. But it still meant name and all of that was still going to affect me. And something that I immediately remembered was those important lessons that I learned around my freshman year of high school, and the importance of the atonement and the plan of salvation, and how things aren't over yet. Even if I don't get to have those blessings in life on earth, I still have that chance in the spirit world or at some other point down the road, because stuff I've even learned at BYU, the restoration isn't ending until the end of the millennium. There's still ongoing stuff until then. And that's at least however many years till that hits, and then 1,000 years. So I've got plenty of time. So I just have a lot of faith and hope that I will still be able to partake of those blessings, especially if I'm doing my best while on earth to live as worthy as I can be of making the covenants that you make in the temple. And that's a pretty scary thing to do when you're about to turn 18 and you've only gotten to do baptisms for the dead up until that point. Because, and something that was like explained to me often early on with accepting that and talking to my parents, was that I don't really know fully what I'm going to be missing out on. And at the time, I didn't have too much knowledge. I just knew it was this important thing that I really wanted. Those ordinances and being able to go into the temple. But I also knew that I couldn't do that as someone else. It just didn't make sense to me the whole way through that experience, and even up to now, to pretend to be someone else just so I could get the ordinances. And that's just been my experience. I know it's different for other people, how the timeline for them went. For me, it was, I'd rather put faith and hope in having that down the road rather than do some even more complex gymnastics that I didn't want to go through, because I wasn't gonna deny myself who I was after figuring everything out. And I guess let's jump ahead to beginning at BYU. I have been very blessed with all the people I've met. We're talking my wards, bishops, stake presidents, professors. I felt like I've had someone there for me the whole way through. Like I have been spared certain hardships because of others that I'm going through still, especially since August, because I got the opportunity even well before I passed, even a year before I had gotten on HRT. I was included in relief societies in my first ward and my second ward, and I had the opportunity in my third ward, but it cut off by that policy change in August. And it really hurts to have that taken away, because that was it just felt right to be in Relief Society, even spiritually. It felt like I was like going over scriptural and doctrinal things with my own peers rather than a bunch of me and a bunch of guys. Like I actually have gone to, because of the policy change, it says I'm supposed to go to Elders Quorum. So 1 week last semester, like in the fall, I decided to go with a friend in my ward who's gay, just to see what it's like. And yeah, no, it's, for me, Elders Quorum is not my second and fourth Sunday activity. And I do know that it is that for men in the church, but I'm not a man. So it's never felt spiritually right to be in there. Hence why I've only really been in a Elders Quorum like however many times when I was little, that time, and like one time before I told my first bishop that I was trans. So it's been mostly that. But thankfully, around the same time that this policy came out was when I finally gained massive community. I've made a lot of friends just during August and September. And that was even without necessarily Gather Conference, but Gather Conference definitely, the way it lined up for this previous one, even though it was kind of awkward with school and all that, it was really transformative, both to get to experience that space, because it felt like the kind of LDS LGBTQ mixed space that I've been wanting since I first figured out I was queer at all. Because, I mean, back in 2021, there was really only a few podcasts, and there was North Star, but it just didn't click for me as the space for me specifically. I know it's a space for other people though, but for me, I needed something different, and I ended up finding that in Gather Conference this last fall, and with all the other things like there's a workshop in the UVU Institute that is for like LGBTQ gospel and Jesus type discussion. And that has no less than 40 people a week at minimum. There's a lot of people that go to that. Not even just UVU students, it's BYU students, it's people that I've gotten to be friends with that are from up north that have even moved down here just to be closer, including some trans women that I have gotten to get to know as other friends. And I've even been able to give some spiritual advice or personal advice to some as well, other friends along the way too. But like it feels weird giving advice, because I felt like I've always been trying to get advice. But I also feel like where I'm at on my journey is that point of doing more of that. And that's like the more recent thing I realized in reading my patriarchal blessing again. There's a part that it doesn't say I'd be a missionary. It doesn't say I'd do this or that. It just says I would be an emissary to the Lord, of the Lord. Like, and with patriarchal blessing, it's kind of nonlinear. There can be parts that happen at a time or happen later or are actively happening. And I don't know, ever since I've gotten so comfortable in my skin, just like for over a year now, it just feels like doing the work in this space finally is like the kind of stuff that I should be doing, and that is the way that I can be an emissary of the Lord, to like doing its missionary work in a different way, because I didn't serve a mission. It didn't feel like I'd be safe on a mission, because I know friends who are trans women that went on their missions, and they either went on their mission before they figured things out, or they went on their mission just after they figured things out, and they had to sit for, if it's a service mission, it's like a year and a half. I don't remember. It's less than a normal full service mission or a full service mission. And they're having to just go and like play this part while still trying to be missionaries. Like to be a missionary while having to hold something of yourself down, because with gender, that's different. You have to, what you're assigned at birth is what you go on your mission as. And that's why I didn't go. I figured out just before, well, that's part of why I didn't go on the mission. I also didn't feel like that was my thing when I was praying about it. I never got any spiritual confirmation saying, this is your calling. It was, it's up to you. The whole way it's been, it's up to you. And I forgot to mention this earlier on, but there's a very specific talk, which I can't remember the name right now, but it's the one about the different roads. And I think it was from Holland. Basically, they went down one road and it turned out to not be the right path, and they went down the other and it turned out to be the right one. That's how I've always gone about this in a spiritual sense, is I listen to the Spirit to hear if it's saying, no, this is the wrong direction. And I've only felt that embracing who I was following the right path. I've never felt that I've needed to dial back on that. I have felt the draw that I need to stay in the church, especially because I have all the reasons that I do to stay, like community and my testimony still being so strong. And sorry, I've gotten a bit emotional and I've lost a bit of my timeline.
You're doing great.
Well, a good thing that has come from making all the new friends I've made in the community I found is also a small thing that some of us do every second and fourth Sunday that is called Trans Second Hour. It's mostly some of the folk at BYU that are active in the church still, and then some others from around the area whenever they can make it. And we basically do like the same kind of like spiritual lesson that's kind of in relation to Come Follow Me to some degree, because it makes it easier to figure out a lesson. But we always find something that we can talk about each week that we meet for that is like spiritually relevant to our experiences. And we cycle who gives the lesson. I've done it twice now. And it's so nice to be able to do that, especially since I lost. Sorry, there's like a reflection of light from out the window. Okay, sorry, I was being blinded. Right. Dang it, I lost my train of thought. I was talking about Trans Second Hour.
Yeah, you're talking about teaching.
Yeah. Being able to like teach and discuss with each other, and to do the same thing that I would have gotten to do in Relief Society actively, but instead with other people that are trans and non-binary and gender fluid, the whole umbrella of people. And I don't know, it's funnily enough, it's felt a bit more spiritually edifying. It definitely would be something I would still do, even if the policy changed to allow me into Relief Society again, because you can just get, we get so much deeper into spiritual topics than sometimes church can be. Like sometimes at church, it does feel like it gets to be a bit more superficial. And I've had years of that superficial, and my experience isn't superficial. But it is still good to have that. But since I'm not allowed that in its fullness right now, having that and Tuesday Come Follow Me group that the Office of Belonging's been doing, and all this, and the UVU thing, it's like I have all these chances every single week or every 4 weeks, because the workshop kind of cycles on and off, to just exercise my faith with other people that are in the same boat or similar boat. And that's helped me stay stronger, because even though my mission with myself has been, I'm never leaving the church, I have had some rocky moments, especially with August initially when that policy hit, because I had no community when that first hit. But then I was immediately given all this community, and that helped re-strengthen things for me, because it still gets hard. I can get fatigued still. I at least have room for myself to take breaks if I feel fatigued. But the church is still important to me, regardless of how I'm feeling at a given time. It's just, it's a constant hike up and down Timpanogos every single day. To put it in terms that some people will understand, it's a very big mountain hike that you can do in a day, but you will feel it for the next few days if you do it in one day and you haven't gotten exercise. Yeah, especially since 2025 started, I felt more called to do things, and that's why I reached out to people trying to figure out actually what I could do to contribute in other spaces, actually. And I did just get informed a few days ago that I'm invited to be on the gender panel for that breakout for this year's Gather conference. I'm pretty sure I can talk about it because there's nothing there's nothing more really to do and prep for it. So I did at least want to make mention of it, because like I'm excited to be able to sit up there, like from the previous conference, to be able to answer questions, because I've spent so many years asking them, and now I have so many that I can answer or discuss answers of in my own experiences to other people, so they can then think of that in terms of themselves and how to go about things. Because sharing experiences are a big part of navigating this space. It's been a big part of how I figured things out, was hearing other people's stories. And because the guiding light of all these other stories, and then thinking on bits and pieces from that have stood out to me. And even some conference talks recently, which is a first for a little while, because conference talks have felt kind of bland for me spiritually, but this most recent conference, I got a lot out of it. We were even starting to do like some LGBTQ stuff in the School of Engineering at BYU, which I'm really excited about. We did a brief panel thing like in March, and we did so good that the we did good enough that the dean of the school said that we can do more. So there's even more chances. Like I volunteered to be on the panel for that, answering the spiritual questions and other types of questions, like how to be an ally and other things. And I just like, this is what is giving me more energy spiritually now, is being able to be more active in this, not just sitting. And even coming on for this episode, I knew it was like my idea or intent to come to see if I could come back at some point, but I was going to wait until I was both not too busy, but also felt like I was ready, just like with the first one. And then I reached out to you when I felt like it was the perfect time to reach out again, especially with all the more recent developments and even the opportunity coming in June of Gather Conference. I'm excited. All these spiritual things have just, I know I'm like sounding a bit funny saying all these spiritual things, but it's like, it's hard for me to voice every single little detail I can, because not everything can be worded with words in English with what I feel with some of this. Sometimes it just has to be the raw emotion. Because, I mean, there's how much else? And I mean, one thing I at least have learned also over the years is the importance to the individual of personal revelation and thinking in terms of stewardship and other things. And at least one thing I do plan on doing when I feel ready for it is making some big personal covenants to actually like make it more than just a goal of being living as worthy as I can of making and keeping the temple covenants and being worthy of the temple, even though I'm not allowed in still. And like some of it, well, how I'm going to go about doing that, making those personal covenants, was left up to me. But the entire concept of doing that, making personal covenants through intense prayer on these things, that came to me as like a prompting that I should do that while I was taking a BYU class a year ago. So for me personally, when I feel ready, I'm going to go on a camping trip into the mountains, and I'm going to pray day and night for however long it feels necessary. And like Enos, because that's like his whole thing with prayer and like making it conversational, is something very important to me. And it's something I've done for years now, is conversations with God. And then make that covenant between me and God, that I will do my best to be worthy of what I am unable to go and do right now, because it is that important to me, that I am willing to do a slightly unorthodox personal thing to quote unquote codify it for myself, rather than it just be a goal that I could give up on. And I have my own personal way of how be able to remind myself every day of that covenant. And it'll be like just something I make or draw during the experience, so that it even comes through during that. This is just like what I've brainstormed on what to do based after feeling that was something I needed to do. And I haven't gotten to do it yet. I haven't felt ready for it yet. I actually went this last summer because I wanted to do it during the summer. And I kind of got told that I needed to wait for a bit more. And God was right, because of all that I've had in the whole last year. And the way I was told to wait was horrible camping conditions, lots of moths, horrible everything. That trip ended within one night because there was equipment failure too. It was kind of like a little nudge saying, you gotta you need a little bit more and then you'll be ready to do this. So I've felt God's hand in my life this whole time. I've not felt like I'm going down a dark path, because I have felt less shame. I have felt way more emotions. Yes, I have, because it's been hard. But no one just really chooses something like this. It was a choice to be who I was, but I was that still, regardless of if I chose to embrace and navigate all this or not. Though I know I would have been spiritually stunted had I not, because I have had so much growth that I probably never would have had, because I would have been unable to feel the Spirit with how depressed I would have consistently. I have actually been off depression meds for quite a while now. It took, like, I have not felt like I still have ups and downs based on seasons and stuff. And with what's going on in the world right now, because I've at least found with this year that I am very empathetic. It's at least come out more with all that's been going on. And I'm at least fairly certain I would not have been able to be who I am now, myself, if I had not decided to let myself go down the path and see if it was the right one. I know this was a bit disjointed still, but that's the best I can sum up my spiritual experience up to this point with navigating being trans in the church.
Wow, Lilly. Respect for continuing to share your story with our listeners and your spiritual maturity. These are some of the things I wrote down, listeners, and then Lilly and I will probably keep talking. Yeah, you can't, if you're not aware of the August policy statements for trans members, anything transitioning away from your sex at birth gets you sideways with church teachings. And you can't hold a temple recommend. You can't go to, the Relief Society or Elders Quorum. You have to go to the quorum or the class for your sex assigned at birth. And so this has kind of been a change where some of that was allowed, as you've talked about. I like that you tried Elders Quorum once. That was courageous. But obviously your spiritual home is with the sisters, and that's no longer possible. So that's just a reality of, your journey, and you talk about that. I love you talking about Gather Conference. This podcast will be released before the next Gather Conference in late June. You're going to be on the panel there in one of the breakouts. So we'll link to the Gather Conference in our show notes. It's in late June. It's in Provo. It's terrific. And I encourage you to attend and hear wonderful people like Lilly. I love this umbrella of community you found and how that's helped you. And it's not just one spot. So you mentioned several things like Gather, and you mentioned the LGBTQ workshop at UVU Institute, where 40 or so are attending, and how helpful that is for you. And even the Office of Belonging Tuesday, Come Follow Me. And so I just think of the need for community for queer Latter-day Saints to grow spiritually and to find hope, and everything that these different points that you've talked to have just helped you. And then I think of things that the church could scale. And this is kind of, I love the song I've Dreamed a Dream, I guess, from Les Mis, or some of the other songs that talk about the future with hope. That song actually is painful at times, but because hope didn't work out. But anyway, I think of the primary program in the church, and my friends you could fact check this, said this started as kind of a member-initiated thing somewhere in California that eventually got adopted church-wide. And so some of the things that start in the church are like the LGBTQ workshop or the Gather Conference or what the Office of Belonging is doing. And I look at the fruits of that as you talk about. It's helping you. spiritually, it's helping you stay in the church. And so I hope that some of these things are scaled church-wide, because every queer Latter-day Saint has told me they need community of people walking the same road to help them just feel like they belong. And then you have this ability that, I have a mission now. I'm an emissary for the Lord to help others. So there's real purpose in this place you're in, where you used to go from the question asker to now I've been on this road long enough that I can help answer questions for others, because I've received some answers in my own journey, and I've matured in a place of deep acceptance to myself. So, I've once said that I hope there's LGBTQ wards. That got me in trouble a little bit, because it sounded like I was an advocate telling the church what to do. But I think I'm not sure that's the right thing to do or not anymore, but I think the principle of community for queer Latter-day Saints, we have Swahili branches and Tongan wards, and we have all sorts of community within the church that helps people feel all the good things that occur in a community. So I hope for more of that, because it's really helped you. And I'm going to talk about what I think the difference. So obviously you are a BYU student without a temple recommend. In my understanding, you don't need a temple recommend to be at BYU. You need ecclesiastical endorsement. There are obviously non-members attending BYU that don't have temple recommends. In fact, they all don't have temple recommends. So sometimes BYU, it allows you to be at BYU and a student in good standing. Do you want to talk more about that? Do you want to talk about, are you living on your own? Are you living with women? Are you living with men? Do you use she, her pronouns at BYU and the name Lilly, or do you have to sort of fit into what's required of BYU of you to be able to be a BYU student in good standing? Is it okay if I ask you those questions?
Yeah.
It might help other trans students thinking of BYU just to know how that works.
Mm-hmm. Well, what started for me is, I'd say it was the beginning of 2022. So that was several months before my first semester here. I reached out to the Office of Belonging, and someone there pointed me to a specific employee that was in both the Office of Belonging and Honor Code office. And she was a trans woman who was actively transitioning. She actually went on the early questions from the closet stuff before it became all out in the open at one point. And I talked with her, and what I was told is that it's like advised against, but transition male to female, female to male, so trans men, trans women is allowed, because you just have to follow the dress code for that other gender completely. So I follow the dress code stuff for women and all of that. But for housing, BYU still goes off of what you're assigned at birth. So I have, at least up until after the spring, summer, roomed with majority or pretty much only cis men. So every new set of roommates, it was got to come out to them within the first week. And it wasn't until I started passing really well when the consideration of rooming with other queer people really came in, because I was I've been doing okay. And then I realized with that one roommate in the fall who almost thought he was going to get in trouble with BYU for breaking that housing policy until I told him I was trans, that kind of let me know I got a room with other queer people now. So now come fall, I'm going to be rooming with a couple other trans women and some non-binary people that I'm friends with. And it's going to be a pretty gay apartment. It'll be fun.
That's great.
I'm excited to be with all of them, because it'll feel a bit more like home. Because while I have been blessed with the amazing roommates I have had over the years, there's still always been a bit of a social disconnect that I've at least felt, because while I can have conversations and all that and do activities with them, it's still a bit different because it's me and a whole bunch of dudes. So there's a whole bunch of things that are different, like than I've at least wanted, but I haven't felt like I really could make happen until I had at least a bunch of queer roommates, is like putting together a chore chart. Because while there are cleaning checks, in most cases, it's easier to do the cleaning when the cleaning check hits rather than doing it on a regular basis. I at times have tried doing it on a regular basis, but then it would only be me. So then I felt discouraged at doing that but it's good to keep an apartment clean. I prefer a clean apartment.
Talk about classroom. What
Oh,
do you go by, Lilly, or do you go by another name?
yeah. So BYU has like a preferred name thing, and it even goes on your student ID. It doesn't apply to every single thing in their system, though. So I do have certain spaces where I have to like cover the computer screen if it's a lab computer for engineering, because the KDM system goes off of the birth name that they have record of. So that won't get updated until I finally go into that office in the ASB to update things, because I did get my legal name updated in February. My birth certificate and everything all says my name. It says, like, my full name now is Lillian James MacKenzie, though I go by Lilly for short with 2 L's. And it feels so good having that now, because especially with what's been going on, I'm actually surprised I've been able to get the things changed, because it's felt with what's been going on since the 20th of January that there's either little time or things won't be able to happen. But I've still been strong as I could be, and I've had friends who have helped me along the way.
What advice would you give to a trans person considering coming to BYU?
Well, you will be able to find community. There's strong community here, and there will be ups, there will be downs. It depends on where you go. I highly recommend avoiding Helaman Halls. I've only heard that it is not great for queer people, especially if you're trans, because that is like a shared floor. So it's more than just a handful of roommates. And there are a lot of safe professors, especially for religion classes, that you can take with. And by safe, I just mean that they are kind and Christ-like and will respect you as a human being. Not anything that would be like something they get in trouble for with BYU, because that has happened before.
Have you worried about losing your ecclesiastical endorsement?
I haven't quite, though, knowing what happened with the church policies back in August and what's been happening with the new year, I have been at least actively worried that they might change things at BYU, because one of the policy changes that happened in August is bathroom stuff at church, which I got lucky with the first building I've ever been in with a neutral bathroom. And BYU has neutral bathrooms too, but it's been easier at times when, instead of going like halfway across the building or halfway across campus to like the nearest one that I could get to that isn't already being used, to use the women's room. I've only done that a handful of times though, because I still feel a bit worried at BYU. So I mainly only really wash my hands when I stop by a women's room, like after eating lunch. But I've gotten down where all the different neutral bathrooms are. And there's even like a little chart or a map. It was a BYU link I've looked at before that tells you where they are. I don't remember why there's one, but there is one.
Thanks for answering tender questions that others may wonder that are trans, how it would work at BYU. And you're a real trailblazer. And I just, sometimes I just want to go up to the 40,000 foot level. And this is, I think listeners, you can tell that Lilly is a deeply committed Latter-day Saint with a deep testimony of the church, the temple, the doctrine, the leaders, were spiritual insights into her journey. And so I would just hope we see Lilly that way without trying to figure out if she should be at BYU or not. Obviously, you're thriving at BYU, you're helping others.
Mm-hmm.
Your roommates are supportive of you. So everything here, to me, there's just fruit of where you are and who you are in your life and the lives of others. And then this, I get really tenderhearted when, not everybody that can't go to the temple really, I got to say this right. You can't go to the temple, but you want to. And that just isn't possible. So sometimes we say, everybody can go to the temple that wants to. You could answer all the temple recommend questions, but because you've done any transitioning away from your sex assigned at birth, you're not able to go to the temple based on the handbook policy. But here you want to even be worthy of the temple. You want to understand those covenants and do your best to live them now. This is a really remarkable spiritual journey you're on. And you want to be like Enos and go to the mountains and somehow dedicate yourself to the Lord in the best way you can without being in the temple to do that there. That's just a remarkable story of yours. And maybe there's parallels in the scriptures of people that, wanted to fully follow Christ, but weren't, and you are fully following Christ, but couldn't go through all the ordinances or logistics at the time. I think of the Gentiles, perhaps, like Cornelius, that wanted to convert, but because he was a Gentile, wasn't allowed to for a period of time. So maybe there's some similarities there in that story in Acts that Ben Shalati recently talked about on his podcast that was really interesting for me. And so I mourn a little bit where we are supporting trans members in the church. And, but then I am deeply touched by who you are, that you're getting this engineering degree, computer engineering degree in the middle of navigating being trans at BYU. And just, it's remarkable just to get an engineering degree in the first place. But you're navigating all that. And then I also loved how you said, this is back to everything about your story is bringing good fruit. That's one of the metaphors we use in the scriptures. We look at if it's a bad tree doesn't bring forth good fruit, and a good tree doesn't bring forth bad fruit, if I said that correctly. And everything that's happening in your life is bringing good fruit to yourself and to others. And even depression, you talked about, I'm off meds, and it's easier to feel the Spirit. I read a book a long time ago, listeners, called Deliverance from Depression. And this isn't a trans story. It's just a really faithful Latter-day Saint that because of her depression lacked the chemicals in her brain to even feel the Spirit. And once she figured that out, it helped take the shame away about not feeling the Spirit. And she did eventually get treatment for her depression, was able to feel the Spirit again. But I love the parallel between your story is, because I feel so good in my body and the euphoria of legally getting my name changed and using she, her pronouns and having that roommate that moves into all male housing and sees you there and thinks he's moved into housing with men and women because you pass and, realizes that you're, I don't want to say that. I want to say any of your
defined
biological history. But I just think, this is the fruit of where you are. And another evidence of that is the depression has left your life. And you've been able to now to sort of turn into the space of having emotional and spiritual capital to help others that are new to this road. So it's a really remarkable story, but I'm glad, I've always felt our congregations shouldn't be like the temple where there is a belief and behavior hurdle to be able to go to the temple. And I realize you probably meet both of those. It's just a policy. But I hope that our families, our congregations don't create that same sort of culture. We just welcome everybody like at BYU. There isn't an ecclesiastical endorsement that's required, but we still do our best to help people feel welcome. And I love that professors, students want to do everything they can to follow the example of Jesus to help you feel welcome as a trans student at BYU. To me, that's not going against church doctrine or church policy. It's just following what Elder Rasband said on the church's website. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quote in front of me. We said it in the last podcast just before yours that our trans members need to be encircled about with arms of love, and we need to be doing everything we can to support trans Latter-day Saints. So that's one of our prophets, seers, and revelators, a member of the Quorum of the 12, talking to us as Latter-day Saints how we should treat people like Lilly. And so when I hear BYU professors and students doing that, they're just following what Elder Rasband has invited us all to do. And we're called to be stone catchers, not stone throwers. And right now in the political discourse and sometimes even in church culture, we're throwing stones at trans people. And we think that's somehow okay. And our senior political leaders are doing that. So sometimes that gives us license to do that. But we shouldn't do that. We should follow the example of Jesus and Elder Rasband quote and do everything we can to help you feel loved and supported. Because who you are is awesome, Lilly. So more things you'd like to share? Anything I've shared that you want to clarify?
I guess one thing I did forget to mention earlier is I did have access to a group in my early days in my hometown that I discovered this at Gather Conference in the fall, actually, because there was a map of all the different gatherings, which are the little registered groups that are for LGBTQ members of the church in different places. And they registered themselves as one. Because it started out as just a little group started by a couple families from one of the wards in my stake when their kids came out a bit before I figured anything out, or around the same time I figured everything out. And then I got to go to that somewhat, even though at that time I was really kind of trapped within myself, figuring everything out. So I would kind of be distant, even when I was at those events to some degree. But seriously, they were really awesome to have, and they were doing it before gatherings, and now they're registered as one, which is really cool. It was really cool to see that. It was really cool to see a pin on Visalia.
That is great. Well, in the show notes, listeners, will link to Lilly's episode 765 if you want to hear more of her story. We'll also link to Gather Conference, and we'll link to any social media that Lilly wants to put in the show notes so you can find Lilly. Just thanks for who you are. I talk about hastening the work is this term we use in the church. And to me, I hear that and I think of hastening the work as helping to make people like Lilly feel she belongs and is needed and is part of the body of Christ. And the gathering of Israel is people like Lilly. We're better off with, she's Israel. She's part of the covenant people, and we're better off with people like Lilly in our church to help us grow. And we need the beautiful diversity that I believe our heavenly parents have created that we see in so many parts of the world, in nature and in science and in the solar system and in the human family. My son and I and his girlfriend went to the Natural History Museum in New York, and we walked through some of those exhibits of just the diversity of the human family. And it was just beautiful for me to see all that beautiful diversity, ethnic diversity and cultural diversity and sexual orientation and gender diversity. And I think we're better off with this diversity because I think we're able to reach more people than we can in sameness. I've always felt Zion is unity in purpose, but it's taking all of our beautiful diversity. And you are the hands, Lilly, that lift other people. I think most of the healing that occurs in this world and help occurs through other people. And I think that makes our heavenly parents happy when we as their children help lift other of their children. Certainly what makes me happy as a parent when I see that in our own family. So you're awesome, Lilly. And you have a great life ahead of you, and you're a trailblazer and a hero and a healer of other people. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome.
So this is Richard Osler and Lilly MacKenzie signing off another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.